The Wednesday meeting between Trump and the West African heads of state has attracted significant attention in different African countries. In the streets of the Senegalese capital of Dakar, opinion remains varied. Some say such a get-together is necessary to foster partnerships, while others say it is likely to compromise a country's sovereignty.
This invitation from American president will be a platform for Senegal and for countries invited to carry the voice of Africa, to show that they are independent countries, countries open to the world, countries ready to enter into equal partnership.
Senegal is one of the West African nations that have been reviewing their ties with former colonial master France with a view to ensuring their sovereignty remains intact. It even asked French troops to leave the country, a move that's been widely celebrated by many in the country. But some Senegalese are quick to caution their government to be careful so as not to replace the country's troops with those from another.
We need to be clear here, because we don't have a land to replace. In other words, the departure of the French army does not mean that other foreign armies will take their place. Today, we have our sovereignty. We are not claiming it. We already have it. So, everything done at this meeting will be done with mutual respect, in a healthy partnership and fruitful collaboration between the two states.
Some analysts are hopeful the meeting in Washington will yield some positive results, depending on how the African heads of state attending it will approach it.
I think that if the five of us who are meeting with the President of the United States manage to work this out, there is no doubt that Africa will benefit from these meetings, which should in fact be positive for the convenience of the USA-Africa axis on the one hand and the axis of the African states on the other.
This meeting comes at a time when the Trump administration has stopped funding many humanitarian programs in Africa and even closed the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. The cuts have left many African countries struggling to fill the funding shortfalls caused by Washington's decision. Many across West Africa will be watching to see whether the meeting in the U.S. will see heads of state from the region come back home with increased support from Washington at a time when the Trump administration is increasingly focusing on its home front. Onjamungai, CGTN.
Well, let's now delve into that meeting further with Tilewa Adebajo, the CEO of CFG Advisory. Great to have you with us on the show, Mr. Adebajo. Now, of course, first question is, does this meeting signal a significant shift in the U.S. strategy in Africa, one in which we're now seeing more commercial opportunities being the focus? Will we see that driving the engagement going forward?
Well, I think it's important that we take a look at the trade statistics and the realities of trade between the U.S. and Africa. While this is a welcome development in terms of the United States reaching out to some key African countries, the reality is that the only thing that Africa had with America was the AGOA, which is the African Growth Opportunities Act. That act is due for renewal this year, and it's unlikely with the Trump administration is going to renew AGOA for the rest of Africa. And with the tariff structures they put in place, it's clear that AGOA is now out of the window. So that's rather unfortunate. So with these key new West African countries meeting with President Trump, I think right now maybe the Americans are trying to redefine their strategy in Africa, in a place where they have lost ground significantly. 10 years ago, America dominated trade with Africa. The Chinese were only doing maybe about trading with only 20% of the African countries. Today, 95 to 100% of those countries, China is dominating trade with 90% of African countries. Maybe only two countries is China maybe coming second to the United States. So the commercial trade patterns in Africa has shifted east towards the Chinese. So America really needs to redefine their strategy in terms of engagement with Africa post-AGOA and post-President Trump's tariff structures.
And of course, there are a lot of questions about what that redefinition of the relationship will look like. And just looking at that recent deal the U.S. did with the DRC, is their strategy looking like it will be beneficial for Africa, both economically and politically, especially given the fact that we've seen the Trump administration axe large parts of U.S. foreign aid to Africa so far?
Well, I think I'm not a proponent of aid to Africa because I think it's not an incentive for development, and Africa is rich enough. We don't really need aid. But I think what has happened is that the big brother intervention that the Americans have done to stop the war is always welcome. I think anybody who intervenes to be able to broker a peace deal, I think especially in the troubled region of DRC and Rwanda and that area, I think is always welcome, because without peace, we cannot have without peace, we can't get economic stability, and without economic stability, we cannot grow, and we cannot benefit Africans. So peace is a very essential ingredient for economic growth and development. So that is always a welcome deal. And I think that the Americans should do more to use their influence around the world and around Africa to be able to broker peace deals, to be able to stabilize African economies, to be able to encourage them to grow and interact with the rest of the global economy. So it's a welcome development.
Well, I'd like to get further into this discussion around security, because 4 of these countries are close to that unstable Sahel region. How much do you think security cooperation will become a feature in this seemingly changing relationship? And what are the most important matters at the top of that list for these countries?
Well, don't forget that America has lost its base, its critical base where it uses for a lot of its drone strategy. With the changes in the Sahel region and the shift from Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. So American influence has waned in that area because most of these guys, those countries, have resorted more to their self-reliance, and also in terms of cutting traditional diplomatic colonial ties and looking more into an independent focus. So I think in terms of building new alliances, what the Americans are doing to see how they can work with some of these other countries that are emerging and to see what sort of coalition they're forming. Because once again, America's military strategy has changed significantly because they've lost critical bases in Africa. And of course, they need to take a look at their strategic orientation within the African continent, not only from a security perspective, but also from an economic and trade perspective. Because right now, America is playing catch up on the continent of Africa.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because we also note that leaders from Africa's biggest economies are absent from this gathering. They're also, of course, going to be facing tariffs of up to 30%, maybe soon. Does this reveal anything about the Trump administration's strategy for the rest of Africa?
Like I said, I think it's quite clear. The South African president was in Washington recently, so I guess there's really no need for him to go back to Washington to engage this time around. And so that's been done. And I think even when the announcements for the tariff came, it seems as if his diplomatic shuttle did not really yield any results, because I think the tariffs for South Africa still stayed at 30%. So like I've said, I think the only thing Africa had with America was the African Growth Opportunities Act. And with the way the Trump administration is going with its tariff structure, it's clear that the African Growth Opportunities Act is going to be thrown out of the window. And I don't think Congress is going to renew that program this year. So Africa really needs to begin to redefine its relationship with the United States. And for countries that are facing tariffs, not all countries are facing tariffs. Nigeria, for instance, because of the nature of its exports, which is more petroleum products, is exempt from those tariffs. But South Africa, I think, has caught the brunt of it, and a lot of the mineral producing nations in Africa, I think, have been caught up in the American tariff structure. So, like I said, it's now in terms of commercial activity dealing with the Americans, it's going to be a significant paradigm shift. And I think it's time to reset that relationship because these tariffs are definitely detrimental to the African economies.